Welcome. Welcome to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to another full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. This is Cade Massey hosting this week with my longtime friend, colleague, co-host, collaborator, Shane Jensen. We two will be here for the whole hour. Our two other co-hosts, Eric Bradlow, Shane Jensen, they're off doing Eric and Adi. Eric and Adi are not here with us. Eric and Adi are off doing Eric and Adi things. They will be back. Some combination, as you guys know, some combination of us are here almost every week of the year. We're talking 48, 49, sometimes 50 weeks of the year, coming up on 12 years in just 2 short months from now. Shane, good to see you. Good to be back.
Happy New Year, Cade. How is going?
Good. I'm down here in toasty, warm, you'd think it was South Florida. It's Central Texas. You guys have had some proper winter up there in the Northeast. I feel like I've been away from the show. I've probably hit, 2 shows in the last 5 weeks or some crazy thing between travel, holidays, teaching, craziness. Glad to be back. Going to slip in here to a regular routine, catching the end of the football season, and we'll transition and start paying attention to some other sports. We've got the NFL bracket filled out. Tragically, as of Sunday night, the last slot got filled. So be it. It's set. These games will start being played. Meantime, college slate semis coming up this week, bizarrely, Thursday, Friday night. We'll pick up that in the second half of the show. We've got Steven Godfrey to come here and talk college football second half of the show. Truth is, we couldn't decide what we want to talk about this week. There's football, 2 flavors, peak season, got to cover them both. So we're going to do college in the second half. First half, Seth Walder, longtime friend of the show. Seth Walder, national football analyst for ESPN. I think of him as the go-between between geeky quants like me and Shane and the rest of the world. He can speak quant. He can speak vibes. He translates between the two. He is a vital cog in the ESPN role. He writes there. He shows up in their studio productions. He's got some new gigs that we're going to hear about a little bit. Seth, always a pleasure. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks for having me. You got to give yourself more credit. I've spoken to you off air. You're a normal person. You can talk.
On good days.
You're the most loving of us, Cade, though. So you represent the upper bound on our connection.
Right.
Well, I'm also probably the lower bound on the stats capabilities on this show. So I used to be kind of mid-range stats, and the world just keeps on, getting fancier, keeps on evolving, hanging on with both hands at this point. Seth, let's just tackle first the bracket.
I feel like Cade was launching into sort of talking about how the college slate was pretty wide open. I feel like the NFL seems the most wide open I've at least personally anecdotally experienced some time. Maybe that's just because Kansas City Chiefs aren't in it. But I don't know if you could kind of speak to sort of whether you sort of see it as wide open and what the most kind of interesting kind of matchups you see are.
I do. We do. And our numbers show that as well. So it's not just a feeling, but our projections do indicate that. I am disappointed because I thought for sure this was going to be the year that we had as where the Super Bowl favorite, who we have as the Seahawks, would have the lowest chance to win the playoff or win the Super Bowl going into the year. But I'm pretty sure, you know what? I take it back because I was looking. Yeah. So I think we have the Seahawks at 20% to win the Super Bowl. And I do believe that is the highest or lowest. I guess I have to go back. What I'm realizing I've done live on air here is that I looked at week 8 through week 18 weeks, and that doesn't work the whole time. 20% is a really low number for a favorite to win the Super Bowl, which is what we have Seattle at. And I do think it speaks to this year where it really hasn't been a team. There hasn't been a single team that I think has jumped out and been a complete team the whole way. And then you have teams like Seattle and Denver, who are great teams, but you could imagine their flaws being the bye week teams. I think if the Rams had been the bye week team, we certainly would have seen that number be higher. But
yeah, I think with the Rams kind of recent loss the Falcons, I think kind of threw it all. Like they were looking at as a more kind of a contention sort of number one, and I do think it's sort of like I see the top teams just in terms of standings this year, and there's a complete mismatch between them and sort of our prior expectations, which is part of why there's a lot of uncertainty going on right now. Do you kind of, I mean, Seattle, you already mentioned as one really surprising team. Do you kind of feel like they're the sort of most surprising team's performance this year? Or, I mean, I'm a Pats fan, so that I've been kind of floored by what they've done. I mean, it's been, I guess, predictable week to week, but certainly not something a ceiling that I did not anticipate coming into the season.
I do think Seattle is the most surprising team. Their defense has just been so unbelievable. It's hard to win that way. It's hard to week in, week out have a defense that is that effective, because we just know the stability on defense is just less week to week, year to year. I think for New England, at least our metrics, FPI is not as high on the Patriots. It's for the obvious reasons. Strength of
Yeah.
schedule has been really weak. And I'll tell you what's remarkable, and I didn't even notice this until right this moment. But another reason why it's sort of wide open, if you look at the top teams in FPI by pure quality, so just team rating, and I'm curious if Massey Peabody has it this way too. Our top 5 teams are all NFC teams, and our 6th team is the Ravens, who aren't in the playoff.
That's crazy.
So,
I mean, the Ravens honestly have made an art of looking great on paper and then, not somehow doing it on the grass field. But that is interesting.
Tragically, that's very college football-esque that the best teams aren't in the playoffs.
but, yeah.
Little Longhorn Baltimore bitterness. But we have Buffalo higher. Buffalo and Jacksonville, we have 4 and 5. So,
okay, yeah.
And then Green Bay down at 7. You probably got Green Bay higher. San Francisco down around 10 or something.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
your
this is
top
all,
5 is all 3 of the West teams, I guess, in the NFC plus.
well, actually, no, we don't have San Francisco. We have San Francisco 9th. No, we have the Eagles 3rd.
Yeah.
I think,
same.
And it's really close. When I say, I mean, we're talking a 10th of a point between Baltimore and Buffalo.
Right.
So it's
Right.
that. But so, if we're right, I'll take credit. And then if we're wrong, and Buffalo just blows out everybody with the Super Bowl, just blame Brian Burke. And
well, that'd be so much fun. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the as open as it is, as different as the team names are this year, I mean, our numbers, we've had Seattle tops for weeks now, and we got them a good, 1.5 stronger than LA, who's a 1.5, 2.5 points stronger than Philly. So there's a fair bit of separation at the top. I mean, back in the Pats Chiefs heyday, that would be kind of typical separation, but it hasn't felt that way lately. I mean, when we run our sim in the end, Seth, we have Seattle at 31% or something.
wow. So you're much, much stronger than us on Seattle. And in fact, I remember that the Massey Peabody had moved on Seattle earlier, which proved correct. But you had them really high earlier in the season than we did. It took us longer to catch up. I'll tell you what concerns me about Seattle. It's having worked on that game last week. I mean, the way they were, well, let's just say this, going into that game, since the first Rams game, week 11, so that's, week 11 on, Sam Darnold's been one of the worst quarterbacks in terms of QBR. And sometimes I think it's very easy to fall into these splits traps, right? We look at splits and we say, hey, but that's not an arbitrary endpoint. That's, I think, when teams started adapting to saying, hey, Seattle's run game isn't as effective as we thought. We can play more 2-high coverage. We can play lighter boxes. We don't have to match their heavy personnel with base personnel. And Darnold has been worse from that moment forward. And in watching that game against the 49ers, for most of that game, it seemed like Seattle was trying to hide Darnold. They had a lot of third downs. They felt like, that were sort of making easy throws, screen passes, things where he didn't have to really rip it. Now at the end he did. He made an absolutely killer play sort of on the move and avoided a sack, and that really won them the game. So it's in there. But man, a team who seems a little bit skittish about their own cornerback, that does worry me as good as their defense has been.
Yeah, I mean, what happened with Minnesota last year would give you the same pause, right? And I don't actually remember, maybe you guys do, kind of what his trajectory looked like going into the playoffs last year, but I feel like it was perhaps a similar thing where I do remember he came out gangbusters at the start of last season, and obviously he again won 14 games or something like that, but then
His last game prior to the playoffs was a disaster in Minnesota.
Yeah.
He actually lasted much longer playing better, but then he really fell out. But then he had a horrible game going into the playoffs, and then obviously horrible game in the playoffs.
Seth, can you flip to the other side of the ball and give us any explanation, any deeper insight into Seattle's defense? So Mike Macdonald has done with that defense essentially what he did with the Ravens defense over their couple of years, taking them to best in the league more or less. I thought for a moment there that the rest of the league, he was right it sounded like he was at the cutting edge when he first came on board. Then people start, typically catching on, people start, copying. And so you don't typically maintain that kind of advantage for multiple years. You don't often get an entire second, turn with it, but he seems to have gotten that. What do you think the heart of McDonald's advantage is? He's a head coach, obviously, but as a defensive guy.
So when he was in Baltimore, he really effectively used simulated blitzes. And what we mean by that is sort of maybe just bringing 4 players, but you don't know which 4 it's going to be. So that maybe there's 6 or 7 guys at the line, and it's not just the 4 down players who come. It's 4 players, and then you end up with one-on-ones, even if they have 6 men blocking, but now you still have 7 back. And I think he still does some of that. And I'm going to steal some analysis from some of my coworkers when I was working on that game. Well, they mentioned 2 things. One, they felt like when he does blitz, though, it's not just to blitz. It's like it's like purely with design, and so he felt like more tactical. And then the other thing was just that the way that they in the run game felt like Leonard Williams has been so effective that they're able to essentially know that if the run goes to Leonard Williams, you have an advantage. And if it goes away from Leonard Williams, you can send players in that direction in advance. And that Seattle is able to take advantage of that. And so those are non-quanti answers. The sim pressure stuff we certainly have seen, or in the past have Seattle or McDonald have success with. I think those are some of the reasons. I also think, and this is not like a great answer here, but I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about schematic advantages in football, I think we have a long way to go in terms of quantifying them, which is the way that I understand football. And I think to some degree you guys too, but I think that there's a lot more there that doesn't show up yet. We'll get there. Not yet.
Mm-hmm. I had one conversation with an analyst who knew something about McDonald's system a couple of years ago, and he talked about the communication, the internal communication around the schemes and the play calls, and how much of an advantage he had just because he made it easier to remember what the play was being called as a family of other plays. And I think once you've simplified communication, you can then, in some sense, use more elaborate communication. You can call on a wider range of plays if you can communicate them more simply. And that sounds like a bizarre thing to have an advantage with, but I do think that was something he deployed early on that probably still does, but gave him an advantage early on. Okay. Why don't we shift gears then? Before we leave the playoffs altogether, some team you like in the AFC, or give us something not obvious that we've been talking about, the kind of heavy favorites in the NFC. What's interesting on the AFC side?
On the AFC side, I think, I kind of think I've been staring at this all day, trying to figure out, I got to do some predictions and figure out who's underrated. The more I look at it, the more I think Denver might be underrated. And I say this as a Bo Nix, someone who's been a Bo Nix skeptic for a long time.
I was about to ask you, convince me on Bo Nix.
Well, he's played a lot better, honestly, I think, over the last few weeks, and I try not to, hyper fixate on just a few games, but it is true. I do think he's played reasonably well in the second half here. But at the same time, it's like, we know the recipe for winning without a great quarterback. You have to have great pieces elsewhere. And they really do have it. They have an excellent offensive line. We've talked a lot about Seattle's defense, but Denver can be right there as well. And then come back to what I said at the beginning of the show, where I feel like the AFC is just weaker. They have an easier path than you might otherwise expect for a 1 seed. I mean, like, there's a world where they're playing Pittsburgh at home in round 2. That's like not even a hard world to fathom. And like, that's all they have to do to get to the AFC Championship game.
Okay, hold on. Is there anything to the narrative, the Steelers narrative that they were selling on Sunday night, that Rodgers and his receivers needed more time, that they're beginning to understand each other better, they communicate better, they see the same things, they're coordinated better, Metcalf will come off of suspension. Hell, they just beat the Ravens without Metcalf. Is there anything to that story, that there's a trajectory here at the end for the Steelers? And this is spoken as one of the diehard Steelers haters in the country.
I highly doubt it. I mean, I don't think that we have seen moments from Rodgers, but I don't think that I would think we're still looking at an average to below average starter. I think that DK Metcalf has been important for them, but he's not like a huge part of their offense. Like, I agree with the general narrative that they miss him and it gives him, that hurts. It's not like they were throwing downfield a ton to Metcalf all season long. I think anyone who's had DK Metcalf in fantasy is like, wait a second, hang on. We're talking about this. And then it's like, I think if Pittsburgh's going to get through, I think it's because they throw the ball really quickly, and that is going to mitigate Houston's edge rushing advantage that they certainly have. And so maybe that's one way where they're well suited against. I don't think it's like he needs more time to mesh with his receivers. I don't.
Okay. What about Josh Allen just picking up and carrying the Bills? What about the best quarterback left in the playoffs?
I think that absolutely could happen. I mean, why not? He's like the best remaining player. If we're talking about predict one player to be incredible, he's that. Now they have weaknesses. Could they need receivers? Yeah. I mean, yeah. But sometimes Allen can especially if it's playoffs, he's willing to shoulder as much of the load on his legs as he wants. Yeah, I think could the Bills make a run? 100%.
Okay, so tell us about these broadcasts that you've been involved with so far. You're doing something different for ESPN.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. So we have this thing called the Playbook broadcast. It's an alternate broadcast, right? So we have the main broadcast. Sometimes there's a Manning cast, and then we have this Playbook broadcast, which we started in week 16. The broadcast I think it's cool. I think it's cool if you like football. It's got an all 22 view. So for a lot of people, no matter what your interest is otherwise, that is a great view. And it's not the full zoomed out like coach's view cam. It's 22 players in the field, but a little closer, which to me is kind of like the ideal view.
Okay.
We're working with a company called Adrenaline, which is Sean Lee is a big player there. Sean Lee, the Cowboys linebacker, if you remember. And they're an analytics company. They've got real-time data coming in from NFL Next Gen Stats. And what they use it for is to predict the probability of blitzes, run pass, and target probability. And it's dynamically updating. So when a linebacker starts to creep forward, you'll see that blitz probability pop. I found that to be really cool, especially if you look sort of just trends over a game. We did the San Francisco game a few weeks ago, not this last week, but a few weeks ago. And in the first half, everything was single digit blitz probability. They were just, 8-9% blitzing. And I don't know if they blitzed at all in the first half. And then suddenly in the second half, it was 40% or 45% or 50%. And they were blitzing more. And to me, that was cool. As someone that
to see
I just need the numbers sometimes to highlight this.
For
and
sure.
even though it's predictive, it was clearly showing a shift in mentality that they had from early in the game to later in the game. So we've
real
been
quickly,
working.
being an academic, we believe in attributions, and this is unnecessary, but might as well call out. Do we want to give Sam Schwartzman credit? I think of the Amazon alt broadcast maybe 2 years ago being the kind of real time moment where these blitz probability started
They have the sort
showing
of
up.
like the
Yeah,
they
that
call it
wasn't probability. That's right. It wasn't quantified. But it was like this guy's more likely to come, and
This
it
guy's
was
more likely
they
to
were
come.
discovering it. They were discovering it real time, which was just ridiculous and great fun.
So that's been great. And then we had a sort of rotating analyst, and it's been ex players, and they've been incredible at breaking down X's and O's. We've been more focused on letting them try to sort of tell us about what's happening schematically over the course of the game. And then the last thing is that either Brian Burke or myself have been on the broadcast as decision analysts. So kind of like the ref analyst when there's a call. Right. It is. It's like instead of Mike Pereira coming in to say like, yeah, this challenge is going to be is going to be upheld. They bring on Brian or me to talk about fourth downs, 2 points, timeouts, any sort of game management, or we were showing a lot more advanced metrics on this broadcast too, so we can answer questions about that. And it's really fun. So I did my first one last week in the Seattle 49ers game, and I'll be on the broadcast on Monday on Texans Steelers. It's
Great fun.
really
Great fun. What's an example of a situation that you were called in to talk about?
So there were sort of like 3 moments that I thought were really, or a bunch that were really exciting in the game I did. So in that game, Seattle went for it at the 4-yard line. They went for it on fourth down. And I think this is kind of old hat to anyone listening to more Moneyball, but like we talk about how the advantage here is you're trying to score a touchdown, but if you fail, you're putting the other team at the 4. And it just, they did fail, and it ended up paying off so well. And it doesn't always work this way, but then the 49ers get a three and out, and they had to punt, and then they committed a penalty on the punt. So the Seattle started at the plus 35 their next drive, and we got to come back and say, hey, see, like wasn't so bad going for it. We had a great, I think kind of a clear, the 49ers made a clear misstep by not calling timeouts at the end. And then my favorite part was there was this wrinkle in this game where Seattle, if it was a tie, Seattle effectively won. It was perfectly equivalent to a win for Seattle. It was not perfectly equivalent to a loss for 49ers, so it wasn't even a quite zero-sum game, which I also found quite fun. So obviously, if it had gone to overtime, that would have been really impactful in terms of
how you
strategy.
Play the game. Yeah, for sure.
But and there was also wrinkles going into like in the fourth quarter where we were talking about this sort of down 4 strategy, right? If you're down 4, go for 2. For San Francisco, they were driving. This almost happened, and I think everyone was in agreement. This wasn't just me, that they ought to go for 2 earlier. This was like 12 minutes left in the game, because overtime was just a much worse proposition for them.
Right.
As usual.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's interesting.
Can I survey you guys for two seconds real quick?
Sure.
This was a question I asked analytics people in the league going into this. If the Seahawks had a down 8 scenario, so the Seahawks had been down 8 and there were, 6 minutes left in the game, should they have gone for 2, knowing that a tie is as good as a win for them? I want to know what your thoughts are, and then I'll tell you what folks in the league said.
I mean, I'm always skeptical when the intuitive answer seems so obvious, right? Because it sure does seem like the answer is yes, since the tie is beneficial.
Such a low probability, I think, though, the tie is still working. It's still working out as a tie at that point, right? I think so. My intuition would be kind of just that the tie would almost be irrelevant to the calculation. You'd still be going for the win.
Yeah. Sorry, do you agree? You agree?
Yeah, I am persuaded by Shane. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I talked to folks in the league. They were mixed. I said some people who felt like you shouldn't, and then some people who felt like you should. When I did out the math, I came to the same conclusion that Shane did, which is like, it all hinges on how given overtime, how likely do you think a tie is? Which is not necessarily an answerable question because we also have this unique state where Seattle is more motivated for a tie than
We
they
haven't
would be.
seen, we haven't seen a setting like that, right? We don't
Exactly.
know. We don't know. It's because the teams are going to play differently. Super interesting.
So if we use 20%, if we say if there's a 20% chance of a tie, which feels like sort of reasonable going into overtime, I don't think you could justify. I think you still go for 2 down 8.
Okay.
But close call.
This is fun that they have you guys pulled in. We need to watch this. It sounds like it's interesting to watch anyway, but to have you and Brian on the podcast, on the actual broadcast, I mean, come on, this is good fun. Listen, Seth, a busy time of year for you. Appreciate you making time for us. Great to hear from you. Thanks for helping us understand the NFL playoffs better. And good luck with the show. So we could dial in and watch you on Monday, the Texans.
Yes, I'll be on Monday,
game.
and Brian will be back for the divisional round.
Cool. All right. Have fun. All right. That's Seth Walder, national analyst for NFL on the ESPN network. We've had him on many times over the years. Always a pleasure. Seth, take care.
Thank you.
That's the first half of Wharton Moneyball. We still have a half to go. Come back and join us after the break. Welcome back. Welcome back to Wharton Moneyball. Welcome to the second half of this week's show, a full hour of sports analytics here on the Wharton Podcast Network. Cade Massey hosting this week with my buddy Shane Jensen. This is Tuesday afternoon show. Will go up on Wednesday, just off the line with Seth Walder talking NFL playoffs, new broadcast platforms. Good fun with Seth always. This was a week where we legit couldn't decide which way to go with our guests because we've got rich football at both the pro and college levels. So we decided we didn't have to decide. We can go both ways. This half of the show, college football, bringing in Steven Godfrey, longtime friend of the show, been with us for years now, always a delight to get time with Steven. Steven writes for Yahoo and the Washington Post. He has his own production company, has a podcast with Ryan Nenny, Phantom Island Podcast, covers a wide range of football and even broader issues. And he is talent, appearing 3 times a week with Andy Staples and Ross Dellinger on Yahoo's College Football Enquirer podcast, which is one of the best ways to dive deep into college football out there. Steven, always a pleasure. Thanks for making time.
How are you guys? I thought of you recently. I think since the last time I've been on the show, I have an 8-year-old now who is 2 things: obsessed with sports stats and wants to go to Texas.
Hey, this is our person. Send him our way. Absolutely. Him? Is this what you said?
Yeah, him. Yeah, 8-year-old son. I have 3 kids. the two eldest boys.
Okay.
He got into Texas. He still has not visited the state of Texas, but Bijan Robinson got him in because we're all Falcons fans in our house.
Absolutely.
And so he all things Bijan, but he has taken this pretty far. He has Texas apparel. He got Texas. He has like Texas, like all the burnt orange, which doesn't really go with anything, or it goes with everything, depending on your mantra.
That's right.
And he is starting to track stats. He's starting to. I'm teaching him how to chart games, and he's got like a 99 or 100 in math right now in the 3rd grade. So I'm not sure he's my kid. So because I failed business calculus twice in college. I failed a lot of classes in college, but calculus especially. So. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of, it's important no matter what show you're on to encourage. I encourage my kids, like my wife and I are graduates of Ole Miss, but because I work in the media, I maintain an objectivity, and I'm not from Mississippi. And we told our kids as they started to take interest in what I do, pick your teams. So I've got a Georgia fan and a Texas fan now, and they're front running. I feel fine with this. Like, it's probably guaranteed more joy. I gave them Atlanta sports, which is a little bit like having some sort of terminal disease. So,
that's heavy.
Yes,
that's a heavy.
I saw your hat and I thought about it, and I was like, man, yeah, I have so much Texas paraphernalia in my house right now.
Well, that makes me kind of proud. Maybe Bill Connolly has influenced him early on. Maybe podcast ain't played nobody got in there early on. But look, we take the kids pretty early. We have summer camps for them. As soon as he hits late junior high, he can come up to Philadelphia and do Wharton Moneyball stuff. We are here for his.
Wait, you're not kidding, right?
Not kidding. No, we have high school kids from all over the world who come for weeks during the summertime to do sports.
Oh my God,
great program.
Oh my God, he would love that. He would love that. Now, anything sports stats has been how he got into sports. Or how he got into math.
Well, that's Adi Wyner, our co-host, is the big driver behind those programs, and his motivation is not to talk sports with kids. His motivation is to pull them into stats via something that they're going to engage with. But also, Austin's a good town, Steven, so you can bring him around Austin anytime, and we'll set him up with some UT stuff.
The plan is, he would love that. The plan is right now he wants to go to Red River. So
even better. I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, tell him, look, you're as legit a person to ask this as anybody. What is a better sporting environment in North America than Texas OU? I'm sure they exist, but it's really, really, really tough to beat Texas OU.
I don't have a full breadth of experience in sporting events, but I can tell you in terms of American football, I've pretty much done it all. I've done multiple Super Bowls. I've done multiple NFL playoff games, that kind of thing. I've been pretty much everywhere in college. And Red River, it gets a little semantic when you start ranking the top 5, but it is 110% a top 5 experience because, it's so funny? The decrepitness of the Cotton Bowl works in its favor on television. It's a forced visual. It's like a special effect because it's crowded. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to distract you. You're basically in a cement sort of like enclave, and then they jam it with one color and another color, and they split it. And on television, it has such a beautiful aesthetic. I had a blast the year that I went. Also, the favorite always loses. It defies math.
It's fun that way. I think the neutrality of the site makes probably the biggest factor there. But it's so much fun. One last thing on Bijan and Atlanta. I was pulling for Atlanta because I was pulling for the Panthers because of Eric Eager, who's PFF and number 3 now with Carolina. So
it's very complicated calculus.
It's a very complicated thing. So because of Eager loyalty, I had to pull for the Falcons. But I love excuses to watch them because Bijan is so ridiculous. I mean, just the average 5-yard run is like a pleasure that you don't get from other runs.
It has a sort of indescribable. It's hard to quantify, but it has a Bo Jackson like Barry Sanders element to it in my as a parent now, to remember what it was like to see exceptional talent isolated at the NFL level, right? Because we have such even competition in the NFL. It's very rare, and I think that's what actually makes a star. I think the first couple times Mahomes defied logic, in his first or second season as a starter. And, maybe not so much the Saints game last weekend, but that Monday night game against the Rams recently where, they were burning off the clock before I think they got the ball back with under a minute left, and he ripped a 95-yard run. It was the longest of his career, including college, is what they said on the broadcast. That kind of stuff. That's how kids find superheroes in athletes, and I think that's what's been so 100%. Cool about this season. Yeah, definitely.
It reminds me as my childhood Monday night long run by a University of Texas running back was Earl Campbell. He ripped about 80 plus yard against the Dolphins up the sidelines on Monday Night Football as probably a rookie. That's one of the great memories as 11-year-old kid. Steven, you are of the South, I think, in so many ways, and I'd even forgotten that you were Ole Miss alum. And I thought about this particular Final Four. You live in Nashville. You talk about your Louisiana family all the time. One of the most influential articles you wrote early in your career was the Bagman article, which I believe was Ole Miss. And so had to talk. Ole Miss is in the Final Four.
I know.
They've got this ridiculous morass of issues around them between quarterback eligibility next year, between the coach having gone, now recruiting players and restricting coaches. It's just absurd, the craziness. How does it feel? What's the sense from the Ole Miss people about what's going on with that team right now?
Well, I just don't think sanity is not possible in Mississippi. Okay. Mississippi by nature tells a good story, but they don't necessarily end in a great place. So the irony is not lost on me that they ascend to this point that they've never really seen in the modern game. They claim 3 national titles. One of those might be semi-legit. As we all know, the title claiming pre 1970 is dubious at best. Yeah. You often have 6 or 7 in one season.
Oh, absolutely.
This is completely uncharted for them, obviously. If you follow college football at all, you should be completely shocked to see Ole Miss up there. They are on it's house money. It's house money. That's the trope I'm going to go with here because I think even the most passionate Ole Miss fan knows that Georgia had them dead to rights a couple times in that game, and more than likely they shouldn't be here. But because of some astronomical athletic play from their quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss, and some, let's say, suspicious decision-making on the play call on that next to last drive for Georgia, they left some time on the clock. It allowed Ole Miss to pull off those big passes and get down in field goal range. Here we are. So it's, I said all that without even mentioning the fact that their head coach is 2-0 in his career, and those two games are in the playoff. And there's this giant sort of unstoppable distraction in Baton Rouge in the form of Lane Kiffin. The latest in that saga right now is that it does not seem, and look, this is early in the transfer portal window. I should clarify what I'm saying. But so far, Ole Miss has still continued to land really big names in the transfer portal. LSU has gotten off to a quieter start. And so I'm not saying there's any buyer's remorse yet with Lane Kiffin at LSU, but every day is a new chapter in the saga. I got a text from an official at Ole Miss, I don't know, half hour after the game ended, the Sugar Bowl. And we were just kind of talking casually. And the big fear was, well, today was all about Ole Miss. And since this whole thing with Lane has started, it's always about Lane. And so there was this feeling after the game, what's Lane going to do next? And then sure enough, now he's calling assistants back to Baton Rouge. And it looks like the running backs coach, Kevin Smith, won't return to go coach in the Fiesta Bowl. And you can always kind of count on Lane to pick the pace of the story up, so to speak. Like, he's like the reality star on those Bravo shows where they're like, hey, can you go pick a fight with somebody just to make like that's Lane's essence, if you will.
Okay. He's an accelerant.
Extremely. Yes.
Well, that game reminded me of a theory that I've been rooting over for a few years now. I enjoyed that game more than any Texas game I watched all year. I think I enjoy football games more when Texas is not involved. I so 100% thoroughly enjoyed. Now, I wanted Ole Miss to win, so I had a interest of some kind, but it wasn't strong. It was just an enjoyable football. It was a perfect football game if for anybody, but especially if you were pulling for Ole Miss. But it's just easier to watch those games when you don't care. You care, but not that much,
Well, I wholeheartedly endorse people to go experience sporting events where they don't have a dog in the race. That's the trick of sports writing. I have a blast when I'm an objective party. When it's your team and your emotional investment and your stakes, it's terrible. I don't even like going to see my teams in games I think they could lose. Right. I love finding that one game on the schedule where you're like, this is going to be comfortable, whatever the sport is. Yeah. Just, hey, this is going to be a comfortable margin. It's going to be fine. Like, I used to tell parents of young kids all the time, if you want the experience and you take the photos and all that stuff of, hey, we're at the stadium, we're at first, dude, preseason. Tickets are easy to get. Kid wants to leave in the second quarter. Nobody cares because there's some third stringer out there. No, I'm 100% with you. Objective viewing of great sports, unless your team wins a championship, it's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, that's right. And so unless you're pulling, you happen to be a Pats fan back at peak Brady or a Chiefs fan for the last 5 years, it's really tough in football. Okay, one last thing on Ole Miss though. Chambliss, can he do that again? Is it possible? You've watched him all year. You've watched him more than I have. And does he need to get past?
I think his touchdown interception ratio right now is 21-3 or 24-3, something like that. He has not been put in a situation where he's made a lot of decision errors, just flat out misreading of coverage or forced into bad decisions. He does not tend to make bad decisions while mobile. And there's a very small list of quarterbacks that you can say that about at the college level, even the pro level, where you run the risk if you're Miami is that it presents a very different looking pocket than the teams that you've beaten so far. Marcel Reed in Texas A&M, and then Julian Sayin in Ohio State. And I think it's going to be, look, I like Miami in the game because of the way their defense is playing. However, I think Charlie Weiss Jr. excels, that's the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, in creating that annoyance. It's almost like being a defensive coordinator in the fact that I think a lot of their schemes and routes are predicated on chaos and they're very sequence reliant. And then you could have someone like Chambliss who can freelance if something breaks down. All this is to say, Miami's very athletic, but there's a danger in over pursuit against a quarterback like this. And some of the stuff that I saw them bottle up Ohio State with, some of the stuff that I saw that worked so well in that really low scoring A&M game, I don't think it's going to apply here. So I think they've got to find a way. And maybe, honestly, maybe it's something more similar to, when mobile quarterback kind of came back as a concept in the aughts, like Michael Vick, for instance. There was this idea that you could solve it with cover 2 or Tampa 2, and you could box, apply pressure, try and get home with 4 or 5, and then really start dropping and start creating problems there. That's antithetical to the way Miami's played this year, but no one's really made Chambliss get into a situation with multiple turnovers. And what's funny is on the other side of the ball, you can say the same thing about, look, Carson Beck has had a clean sheet for a while now, which was the big knock on him going to Miami and the price tag associated with him. So, it's probably cliche to say this, but I think the game is going to rely on turnovers from the quarterback position specifically, because I think in Miami you have so much raw talent, and then in Ole Miss, I think really they're kind of the most creative team left in the Final Four.
Yeah, he just hasn't given some of the concern that you get, like you said, decision making on the move. I mean, there's plenty of mobile quarterbacks who you can't quite trust when they start making a decision out there.
Sure.
He hasn't given us that evidence yet. All right, let's shift to the other game, and what ought to be and will be, if they win the whole thing, one of the great stories in sports. Really, I mean, really, I think it's hard to oversell what Cignetti has done at Indiana. If they get this done, it's just remarkable. Somehow all the drama at Ole Miss is staying level with Indiana so far. Let's talk a little bit about Indiana. Can you help us understand how this has happened in the 2-year window? What is Cignetti? Even where does, many people don't know where Cignetti came from, but to come as far as quickly as he has, and this program, the losingest program in the history of college football, to come as far as quickly as they have. How do you explain this, Steve?
I often invoke a lot of sort of math vocabulary when I talk casually about this, which is I talk about data sets and I talk about bias sampling. I think that we're forced into referendum all the time in my industry, right? We want to know why something's happening, what the blueprint is, how is this going to change? The reality is this: we have about 4.5 years worth of data on the portal. We have 2 years of data on a 12-team playoff. Okay. We have a couple years of 9-game conference structure in the Big Ten. And then I think it's really hard to create any data for the selection committee because I shouldn't swear on this show, but I have thoughts on the lack of consistency amongst the selection committee and just how foolish they are. So with all these mitigating factors in mind, where we don't have 10 or 15 years worth of data to look at, I think what stands out in a short period of time is that, yes, a lot of teams are hitting the portal. Okay, we know that. And a lot of teams that are hitting the portal effectively have made it thus far. Like The Athletic, I think, I don't know how they built the stat, but they compiled starts at every position by a transfer or by a signed scholarship player out of high school. Ole Miss had the highest percentage. Indiana had the second.
Of transfer starts.
Transfer starts in the 2025 season. So any position start where they transfer, where they, native or whatever you want to call them. So Ole Miss and Indiana led the pack. Oregon was close. This is just the playoff teams, by the way. And then on the lower end, you had Georgia. And it roughly sussed out to what you thought, right? So it's the teams that look like they don't belong here historically. So Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Indiana. Oregon trends a little bit more towards transfers, although no one really seems surprised by that. And then your stalwart high school recruiting, Tiffany Brands, Ohio State, Georgia, et cetera, they skewed lower. So everybody's used the portal. And I swear I bet I was on here talking about how Florida State was doing it well 2 or 3 years ago. I probably was.
Sure.
But
you had good company.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were all kind of trying this out for the first time. We didn't really know what the methodology was, And in this short amount of time, I keep trying to want to add context to this or put a giant asterisk around what I'm saying. The consistency that Indiana has had has been because they have almost a professional level, like NFL level of talent evaluation. So a lot of the key players and key contributors right now, standout guys, are James Madison transfers. And that's where, in case people listening don't know, that's where Cignetti came from, is James Madison. And so what that tells us is we've seen this trend now of coaches coming in, they'll take 9 or 10 guys from their previous job and portal them in. But they either wash out at the higher level or they're just not as effective. What I'm seeing from Indiana is something that shouldn't make sense, which is it is a portal-driven development culture. So that sentence should not make sense.
Right. Yes,
but in
right.
a short amount of time, what I'm seeing is just as much consistency from guys they transferred in from the smaller schools who were maybe 2 stars coming out of high school or less or not ranked at all, who developed up and then continue to meet the expectation of playing a full Big Ten slate instead of a full Sun Belt slate. While you're also seeing, oh my God, the name escapes me. He was on the podium at the Rose Bowl, the center that transferred from Notre Dame, right?
Okay.
So they're keen in their evaluation. They're sharp with it, and they don't miss. So how do I explain Indiana, who's the best team left in this tournament, and I think the odds-on national title favorite, it's very strange to say, versus Florida State from a couple years ago, where they hit on Jared Verse, they hit on Keon Coleman, right? These are NFL players now. And I think I'm talking about the year 2022 because the next 2 or 3 years, they had those same, the methodology was in place, but 2 things happened. In a state like Florida, you have to underpin everything with high school recruiting, because I'll talk about Miami in a second. And then you have to continue to sort of hit 21, right? Everybody's hit blackjack if they sit at the table long enough, but that's not a consistent money-making method. That's why the casinos are so nice. They took our money and built really nice buildings. And there was this casino-like logic early on with some of these premier programs that wanted to live top-heavy with the portal without also doing all of the unsexy stuff and the traditional scouting in high school methodology. Now, we have a theory on the Yahoo show. Andy Staples and I have talked about this. If we're right about this, it should start to move Indiana's pendulum a little bit towards high school as well. That percentage, I think it was like 64% of starts or something like that. Let's say it's somewhere in the 60s. I think you could see it closer to 45 one day, but if it lived in the 50s, that would be the sign of a healthy program. Now, here's what's interesting. It is a lot, but here's what's interesting. Like, you grew up on Texas, right? Florida State has the state of Florida. University of Georgia should never really be flourishing in the portal because they have the state of Georgia at their back.
They are, right.
Right. Yeah. Indiana, not so much.
Yeah, right.
Ole Miss, high amount of talent, but still an underpopulated state. So I'm curious how long you can sustain with a portal dominant strategy. And unfortunately, the answer is we don't know, because we only have about 4 years worth of real data here. What I can tell you emphatically is that you can go far with a portal team. You can go very far with a portal team, for sure.
I ask a question that even less data is based on, just because I've been hearing with Cignetti and what he's done there, and the fact that Mendoza is probably going to be the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Would the Raiders, would there be any intrigue or thought that, like, well, let's keep this very successful kind of combo together? Would they ever consider him for a coaching position? Based again on the assumption that they are taking Mendoza with the number 1 pick.
All indications tell me that Cignetti doesn't want to go to the pros, that he's happy where he is. I think Cignetti is mindful enough that he's found a situation where they're going to build him a statue regardless. He's now top 5 compensation, I think, currently. If you could just go by average annual value, like it's a hockey contract, like AAV, I think with bonuses and everything else, he's in the top 5. I don't see him moving off of that position anytime soon. And if I'm an NFL GM, I would question the recency of it all. Like, I would want to see more information. The only person that agents talk to me about as the sort of how would I describe this? The only candidate right now on the college side that agents have said would be a no-brainer on the NFL side is still Marcus Freeman. But he has taken his name out of this cycle, and I think it'll be an annual thing from here on out where Freeman will probably have to speak on whether or not he's interested each cycle, as long as they keep winning. So Cignetti, I feel like, would probably stay in the college game. And then, I could see maybe a Dan Lanning one day, but not anytime soon.
Don't you wish Bobby Knight was still around so he could go revel in the old schoolness of Curt Cignetti at his university?
I think those two would get along great.
Wouldn't they, though?
Yeah.
So I wasn't paying attention when they hired him. Can you try to somehow get objectively back to that moment and talk about the consensus when it happened? I mean, college football coaches, I think that's one of the toughest hiring decisions possible. The different things they have to be good at, it's just absurd. It's really tough to get this right. How was that hire evaluated at the time?
Forgive me for my Pennsylvania geography. Where is IUP at?
IUP. I don't even know. Indiana University, Pennsylvania. Shane, do you have any idea? I don't know.
Not in the Philadelphia area. I can
not Eastern PA.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm now looking it up because it is. Oh, sorry. It's in Indiana, Pennsylvania.
I couldn't tell you where that is.
All right. I'm still. Oh, okay.
We're the Indiana side, I would think, right?
We're on the west side. I just found it. We're on the west side. We're much closer to Pittsburgh. Okay. We're in. Yeah, that's the middle of nowhere. I know that. Because as a sports writer going to Penn State for many years, people have described Pennsylvania as Pittsburgh on one side, Philadelphia on the other, and Arkansas in the middle. Which is a Southerner. I can tell that joke. IUP is where he started his head coaching career.
Okay.
He was on the initial Saban Alabama staff. I want to say just for one season.
Okay.
So it was, he's Saban tree, but I really wouldn't call him that.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot in common structurally with he's dour. He makes, he sort of stares down media in a similar way. Structurally, he doesn't have a ton in common with Saban, honestly. So I would feel hesitant to call him a Saban tree. But in 2011, he starts his head coaching career at IUP, which is why I asked that. Builds a winner there, goes to Elon, which is a CAA team in South Carolina, and then jumps up and gets the James Madison job as the transition head coach, meaning that James Madison was going from FCS to FBS. That isn't, first off, let me say this. Almost every coach I've ever known who was the sitting head coach at an FCS team, when they move up, knows that they are a dead man walking. It's incredibly hard to lead a transition and program, and we can get into it another time. He not only led it, but succeeded more so at JMU in the 2 years that they were a Sun Belt member at the FBS level. Of course, in 23, he goes 11-1. They start to make kind of noise nationally. James Madison also, to Sig's credit, and I guess this is very similar to Saban, he's very mindful of where he jumps and resource. He has not chased helmets in the sense of looking for a bigger job, because James Madison saved for years and fundraised for years and almost became too big for the FCS. Have you ever gone down I-81 in Virginia and seen that football stadium from the interstate? It doesn't look like you're in the FCS.
Okay.
They were, from a facilities fundraising, from an enrollment, from all of the things standpoint, a lot of teams move up to the FBS and kind of mortgage it. They kind of just like lend it out and figure out how to pay for it later. This was a program that was so ready that they dominated right away. And Cignetti was, again, talent evaluating and recruiting inside the margins of the DMV zone and the Carolinas, where you're not the first pig to that trough if you're at James Madison, but consistently evaluating at a high level. And so his last 3 years, he's 12 wins and then 8 wins on the transition, 11 wins.
Absurd. It's an absurd transition.
Here's the deal, though. So you're Indiana, and you are historically awful, moribund, right? Just awful. At one point, losing his program in FBS history. What appealed to Indiana about Cignetti was the development culture and the consistency.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What appealed to Cignetti about Indiana was that he saw it in the room. I know, like, I'm sure you guys get tired of hearing about like Michael Lewis references, but it was very much that
No, we're here for the
okay.
Michael Lewis references.
Okay. He saw the market. I mean, it is a little bit like the first act of The Big Short, where he saw where the market was going. And, you know, that The Big Short's not a great comp because that's more about betting against the market. He didn't bet against the market. He actually got to the market so much faster than some of the Big Ten and SEC peers that he's now beating. That's a huge component of it. But there was an immediate.
What you're saying is the market is the portal, the new world that we're living in.
But also the ability to pay for it.
Yeah.
So there's this beautiful moment that happens where someone has correctly identified a coming trend, and then they go and they find the right partner.
Underutilized, undervalued asset that's going to be differently valued if it's
what's historically known about IU? Okay, bad football. They have a great business school, and they're chock-a-block with alumni looking to spend money. All right.
Why is that? That part I didn't know. And I've heard that they're big spenders in the NIL world. I wouldn't have known that. Even with the good business school, I wouldn't have known. I think first, honestly, basketball, then I think music and business school is probably third.
My co-host on Yahoo, Ross Dellinger, he's reported this out before, but basically the estimation of TV, and TV's God to college, is that basketball is worth something like 10 or 15% of your TV value. And so to go back to that moment, that great moment of Kismet when Cignetti met Indiana, Indiana's leadership had become increasingly aware of, we're never going to be done with realignment. We're going to find a super league one day. And Indiana right now is a historic basketball power, emphasis on the historic, right? What else did they offer, and where else is there value in the current market? So there was this flood of emphasis to go into football from the university, from the donors who wrote the checks, from the athletic department, and then from a coach who said, hey, not only, keep in mind, guys, there were a lot of coaches that were protesting this concept. Dabo Sweeney, remember that?
Yeah.
How's Dabo doing?
Yeah.
So there were a lot of coaches that said, I don't want any part of this. And what he said was, if you can fund this at the highest level, I can work this system. Then they had the beautiful benefit of being a Trojan horse last year. And so that kind of takes us now to the season. You know, we talked about this on the show the other day. I don't think anybody took this team seriously until they beat Oregon the first time this year. Even last year, the way in which they lost to a really hot, really talented Notre Dame team, everyone thought,
yep,
BS,
absolutely.
Light schedule, Big Ten doesn't know what it's doing. They barfed up this undefeated team because they don't have enough quality middle-class programs. There's one thing I'd actually like to talk to you guys about. And I don't know how you figure out how to do this with a number, but I would love to. Because Indiana is representing a change here, but I think the Big Ten is on the cusp of changing this entire overall narrative. And I think, I mean, I'm changing the subject here a little bit, but I think Indiana, if Indiana's hoisting the national championship in 2 weeks, we're going to reverse engineer this season. And I think what we're going to see is we have terminally, in our bias as a Southern-driven sport for 20 years, given the benefit of the doubt to programs who no longer deserve it. And we're going to have to admit this publicly and then work it back. And that's going to be really hard for some people in the media. So what I'm talking about is the total dismantling of Alabama. All right. When selection,
that's the moment.
When Selection Sunday came around, every pundit, even my co-hosts who know a ton about the sport, and I just said, why? And I'm not trying to make myself out like I knew, but I just said, why do we have to? We have to assume that the two teams that make the SEC championship must be included in the 12-team format. And everyone said, well, you can't punish them for going to Atlanta and losing. And I said, well, what if they suck? What if this is just another opportunity to show that their resume is weak? And so Alabama gets the benefit of the doubt. They go in, they kind of squeak past an Oklahoma team that didn't look that great either. And then Indiana shows that they are a full world away from actual title contender. And what's interesting to me now is to look at this Final Four game and to look at the team that brought both of these two schools to their knees, which was Iowa. And that Iowa team was probably one win away. Now, they didn't get it. They didn't beat USC. But had that Iowa team been a true 9-win contender going into Selection Sunday, I don't think that they could have beaten out an Alabama. We already know that Alabama beat out a Notre Dame team that they're not as good as. This SEC bias thing, and I'm talking to you from inside the Death Star, okay? This SEC bias thing, I think some serious work needs to be done analytically in the numbers world, in the world of the quantitatives, to somehow suss out and explain why. I think it's baked into the preseason rankings. I think television plays a role in this. And I think by the time we start with the selection committee in early November, we've already kind of calcified our perception of some of these schools. And I think it's incorrect. And I think Illinois hurts for this. I think Iowa hurts for this. I think the Big Ten hurts.
It's a worthy topic, and we should take it up. We should take it up sometime over the next 12 months. I push back on one particular dimension, and that is the depth of the SEC versus the depth of the Big Ten. And so whenever you start bringing Illinois into the conversation, I start wanting to jump in, because what's true is that the numbers this year, Steven, this is actually something you were talking a minute ago about how people weren't buying Indiana until they beat Oregon this year because of the experience last year. The numbers were saying Indiana, and I was having the hardest time believing, like, Indiana was at the top from like mid-season on. It's like the number one team in college football is Indiana. And I was like, really? It's like, it was one of these places where one of the good analytics show you things a few weeks before the rest of the world sees them. And power rankings were showing this. But let me just finish real quickly. Indiana and Ohio State have been above the top of the SEC all season long, more or less. But then, like, the next 8 teams are SEC teams, and just the variance on the Big Ten is so much broader. And that means that making it through that 9-game schedule, it's only been 8 games, but it's about to be 9 games in the SEC, is going to be a loss-generating proposition. And so I'm sympathetic.
I like that terminology.
I'm an insider now, being a Longhorn person, but like I'm going to be sympathetic to the 3-loss SEC teams because of the rigor of the schedule that they play.
I think it's a couple of things. One, I was going to mention this. Anytime Connolly, when he's putting the numbers together and it spits them back out, and he's getting these results that the public won't accept yet, I always love it when Connolly, and I'm talking to him about it, because you just get this exhausted sigh, because he knows, people still think quantitatives, that they think that, like, Bill sat up and made this.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, you know what? I'm putting Indiana number 1 this week. Screw everything. And he'll have those weeks where he gets the numbers back and he's just like, oh God,
I got to explain these numbers to the world.
Which is why he's kind of started othering the ranking and, like, sort of turning the ranking sentient and just saying, like, I don't agree with the rank, but this is what SP told me this week. I had a really interesting conversation for an off-season piece I was doing a year ago with a recruiting analyst named Steve Wiltfong. He works for On3. He's been doing it for a really long time. And I think recruiting analyst is a dubious term. It's got a kind of like a Vegas sheen about it. And I don't, like, it's just, it's
really just the sports writing beat at this point, right? I mean, more
no kidding. Gosh, but I digress. But Steve is a really well-respected guy. He's been doing it for a long time. And one of the sort of big futures bets in college football is that the Illinois, Iowas, et cetera, and Indiana, which is just sort of way above schedule, way past schedule, ahead of schedule is what I should say, are going to establish a more respectable Big Ten middle class. And so to see the Alabama result and to see some of the things that, like, to see last year's data set where it just felt like the SEC was going to lose their mind because SMU got in. But then South Carolina loses a bowl and Alabama loses a bowl. And I know everybody says, well, it's because of the opt-outs or whatever. We are continuing to see an SEC product that, yes, has the robust middle. And week after week, it's like the Bruce Feldman body blow theory, right? Is like, if you play that week after week after week, you're going to start to sort of wear down, or, the cream rises. But I don't know if they're ever, I don't know what's exceptional anymore in the SEC, because I'm going to tell you this as an alumni of the one team left. Is that the best team in the SEC?
Right.
Like,
right. Well, I mean, when Chambliss when he plays like he did last weekend, I mean,
yeah,
quite possibly.
Texas is going to be a great case study next year, specifically. It's funny to go back to my 8-year-old. The worst thing is he's really math strong. He's a Texas fan, so he's incredibly literal. And so it does not make sense to him Everything is black and white. And he goes, wait, Texas has a ton of money. You told me that. I was like, oh yeah, Texas. Yeah, but Texas has got a lot of alumni. They spend a lot of money. He goes, well, then they should be in the playoff. And I go, hey man, I said, welcome to the quandary that is Texas athletics. Sometimes I was like, it doesn't always suss out that way, or A&M would have 10 national titles. Texas is going to be a fascinating case study next year because we can now start to build a referendum on, all right, I know why the TV revenue side of this made sense for y'all in Austin. I get that, right? You're going to make a ton of money on TV. But think about all those years Oklahoma kind of got to like moonwalk into the 4-team playoff.
100%.
So is this going to be a sustainable product if you jam these conferences filled with contenders and they eat each other alive?
God knows it's going to, I mean, we can argue this all night and then they're going to change it again in a couple of years. But what's true is that it felt like it was a necessary move because SEC was truly separating from the rest of the world and you were losing talent. Like if you look at what Texas A&M's recruiting rankings did in like the 10 years before they joined the SEC and then the 10 years after, it's just extraordinary. And Texas was at a disadvantage because players wanted to play in the SEC, but that was before NIL and portal. And now it's really just leveled the playing field. People are willing to go to Lubbock or
I would love to combine
Bloomington.
Like to write a dissertation or something on this that's half analytical and half social science, because I think that Katrina in Texas backdoored an SEC expansion in the most miserable of human experiences, obviously.
Wow.
But the volume of relocation and the anecdotal evidence I have of the 10 years after Katrina of kids, families that were from Louisiana and the Gulf Coast who migrated into Texas, and then it allowed those brands to go into Texas and recruit with a little bit more familiarity. It almost made it mandatory, like you're saying, when the decision came for the Red River schools, that the world was moving east. It's very fascinating to me. Now, financially, you can't argue it. But, by the way, as I say this, and maybe the next time I'm on the show, this will be settled. I think according to Ross, it will be. This playoff will expand. The next time we play this playoff, there will be at least 14 teams. And if I'm betting right now, I'm saying that it's probably going to be 16. I don't love that either.
Yeah, that's another whole frontier here that's moving. All right, let's save it for the next time, Steven.
Yes, sir.
Greatly appreciate you. Got the deep dive we were hoping for on college football and come away thinking about it a little bit differently. Greatly appreciate it. I have to tell you, the two stories we've talked about, I mean, Ole Miss and Indiana, it will be glorious if that's the matchup, because as far as I'm concerned, like there's just either one of them is one of the most remarkable stories in decades. And so we'll see. We'll probably end up with Miami, Oregon. It would be so depressing.
I would love for people to embrace parity. Like I was at the FCS national title game last night here in Nashville.
Yeah,
Montana State, Illinois State. It was an amazing game. There was no North Dakota State. There was no 62-0 win like we've seen for the last 15 years at that level.
Okay.
The portal has created so much parity at every level of the sport that I think parity is like the NFL tells us, right? What do we glean?
Right.
Good, we like parity. We like it. So
Right.
I'm hoping college football learns to embrace it.
I think they will. I think this Final Four alone is a great case for it. All right, guys, you can catch Steven Godfrey many places. He is a writer for Yahoo Sports and the Washington Post. You can catch his production company's podcast, Phantom Island. You can catch him on the College Football Enquirer podcast with Staples and Dellinger, one of the great writers on college football. Thanks for the time, Steven. Always good to visit with you.
Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely. Take care. For the whole team here, we've lost Shane Jensen there at the very end. For Eric Bradlow and Adi Wyner in absentia. For Deion Simpkins making this thing happen. Marissa Reyna, Dee Patel, the whole team. And for you guys, the listeners, thanks for being here. Come back and join us next time. Between now and then, enjoy your sports.